Iran angers Trump after rebuilding its missile system and reorganizing air defenses in sensitive areas of southern Iran, mainly near the island of Kashmir and Sirik, places that had already been hit by the Americans. The information, attributed to a high-ranking United States defense official, carries weight because it shows that Tehran used the period after the April 7th ceasefire to move equipment, recover part of its military structure, and try to get back in the game by putting pressure on ships, bases, and trade routes. The response came at the same pace as the tension. New American actions, military reinforcement in the Arabian Sea, and a stern warning from Trump against any Iranian attempt to turn negotiations into blackmail. The Revolutionary Guard also released images of missile and drone launches and claimed to have attacked the base of the US Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain and the air base at Ali al-Salem. The regime tried to project strength, but ended up creating another crisis with Gulf nations, angered American allies, and gave Trump the argument he wanted. Iran talks about diplomacy while rebuilding its intimidation machine.
Dear and honorable people of Islamic Iran, your brave sons in the naval and aerospace forces of the Revolutionary Guard, during a joint missile and drone operation between 2 and 3 a.m. today, Sunday, the 7th of Tir, they launched ballistic missiles and drones against 8 important army infrastructures. Aggressor of the United States at the Ali Salem base in Kuwait and at the 5th Naval Fleet in Salman Port, Bahrain, destroying them and responding in a democratic and decisive way to the recent aggressions of the United States.
Iran. It was in this environment that the United States once again targeted areas linked to the Iranian military structure after attacks on vessels and Tehran's pressure to impose its own rules of passage. Iran tried to present its actions as defensive, but the behavior shows something else. The Revolutionary Guard began to require vessels to follow routes approved by Tehran, and according to reports, issued warnings against ships that did not obey these instructions. The Guard served to create fear in maritime traffic and force companies to ask permission from the very regime that was causing the instability. That's where the crisis changes level. I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran released a video on Sunday that, according to state television, showed new missile attacks against Naramia bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. Washington and Tehran exchanged fire and new threats over the weekend in the most significant escalation since both sides agreed to a 14-point memorandum aimed at ending the armed conflict. Photographs released by the Bahraini police reportedly showed damage to a residential building hit by an Iranian drone. A Ziraiva official confirmed Iranian attacks on American facilities and told Reuters that there were no reports of American casualties or significant damage to Ziraiva sites. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, wrote on social media that, quote, "There may come a time when we will no longer be able to be reasonable and will be forced to finish militarily the work we started so successfully. If that happens," he wrote, "the Islamic Republic of Iran will cease to exist." The conflict began when Ziwar of Israel jointly attacked Iran at the end of February. Iran responded by firing drones and rockets at Israel and at Gulf nations that host American military bases, and Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important energy shipping route, for most of the past 4 months. A provisional agreement, signed in early June, was aimed at reopening the strait and bringing both sides to negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, while Washington suspended sanctions against Tehran, but the fighting resumed and intensified. Then, the Central Command of the U.S. said earlier that its forces carried out new strikes after a Panama-flagged oil tanker was attacked by an Iranian drone on Saturday. Press TV, Iran's state broadcaster, reported that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, said that the Mosul-Ozawa attacks violated the ceasefire and, quote, "will result in the complete halt of all diplomatic processes." Trump repeatedly stated that Iran had agreed or would agree to concessions in its nuclear program, only for Tehran to deny such claims. And Tehran has insisted that it would have a role in managing traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which Trump stated would remain open to navigation. During a visit to Baghdad, Iran's foreign minister on Sunday called on all parties to abide by the signed Memorandum of Understanding.
The American president had already indicated that if Tehran did not comply with the agreement, Washington could finish the job militarily. A ceasefire could not become free time for the regime to rebuild missiles, hide equipment, reposition batteries, and then go back to threatening American bases. The Revolutionary Guard responded with propaganda. They released images of ballistic missile and drone launches and claimed that their targets were American facilities in Kuwait and Israel. The message was to try to show strength to their domestic base and regional allies, but the practical result was different. Kuwait reported that its defenses intercepted 2 ballistic missiles. In Bahrain, sirens sounded more than once. And authorities reported material damage to a residential building in Muharraq province, with no reports of casualties. The takeaway is awkward for Tehran. The regime targets bases, it promises a response. A heavy response, but it ends up increasing the risk to civilian areas and irritating governments that already saw Iran as a threat. Bahrain classified the action as a serious violation of its sovereignty and called for an international response. Kuwait also condemned the attacks and emphasized that its forces were ready to protect its territory. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates joined in the criticism. Even governments that often prefer diplomatic caution began to treat the attacks as a dangerous escalation. For Trump, this regional isolation of Tehran strengthens the American position. Iran tried to turn the crisis into a confrontation with Washington, but ended up creating friction with neighbors who don't want to become targets of the Revolutionary Guard. The American movement in the Arabian Sea completed the message. Sailors aboard the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush carried out flight operations while the vessel was transiting the region. While Tehran tries to sell its launch videos as proof of strength, Washington demonstrates logistics, naval aviation, and constant presence. This is the point that infuriates Trump, because Iran tries to talk about diplomacy to buy time, and at the same time uses the Revolutionary Guard to test limits in the Gulf. Tehran also tried to threaten the diplomatic process. The Revolutionary Guard said that new American attacks could paralyze negotiations and promised a harsh response against United States bases in the region. But this threat also has another side. When the regime says it might abandon talks, it tries to create fear in Washington and in the mediating nations. Iran gets trapped in its own performance. It threatens to leave but needs to negotiate. It promises hell but avoids a bigger direct confrontation. It talks about control. But it relies on psychological pressure to appear stronger. The Iranian regime also tries to use the crisis for domestic consumption. After previous attacks, military losses, and international pressure, the Revolutionary Guard needs to show that it can still respond. The videos of missiles and drones serve to feed this narrative, but the reality is harsher.
We're stuck, and I don't even know if we're really in charge. If this starts, it has to be finished, and we're not finishing. If it means sending troops, do whatever it takes. But to win this and end it?
You're talking about a challenge, Sid. Isn't it a bit of an exaggeration to say we're stuck? Because President Trump is showing patience by saying he's going to let this play out. But as Jody DeVance, the vice president, said here, we've already won because we put this decision in their hands. Everyone knows, and President Trump and Jody DeVance are well aware that the IRGC commander, Ismail Pahlavi, is making things complicated when Ghalibafi comes to the negotiating table. But the way the government sees it, and President Trump as well, we can continue for as long as we want. And in the end, putting an end to this once and for all is under consideration.
We can't go on like this. Gas is way too expensive and the midterm elections are coming up. Look, let's have an honest discussion about this too. I'm a sports guy, Griff. I was with Doive. It's been like this for many, many years. The game doesn't end in the 6th inning. We haven't won anything yet. I'm sorry, Mr. President, to break this news, but we haven't won anything yet. There was no end to this. We're pretty much in the exact same place we were a few months ago. They're still attacking us. We're still attacking them. Israel is still nervous, and to be honest, American voters are still nervous. So, how can you declare victory when the game is far from over?
Lebanon's connection was also considered. Israel resumed actions against Hezbollah structures in southern Lebanon, while the United States is strengthening support for efforts to contain groups linked to Iran. The regional message is clear. Washington and its allies do not want to deal with just an isolated attack, but the network of pressure led by Tehran, Iran in the Gulf, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and aligned militias on other fronts all form the same problem. The White House knows that if it responds to just one point, the regime tries to open another. Trump benefits politically from this interpretation because it casts Iran in the role of provocateur. The White House's narrative is simple for the American public. There was a provisional agreement, Iran rebuilt systems, harassed ships, attacked bases in partner nations, and even threatened to end negotiations. With this, the president gains room to advocate for strength without appearing to be seeking war on impulse. He can say that he is reacting to a regime that signed a truce and then tried to violate it step by step. The American response also targets the confidence of Gulf nations. Bahrain and Kuwait host strategic US facilities and cannot give the impression of abandonment. Iran continues to bet on a war of nerves. It launches, threatens, denies, blames the United States, talks about defense, and tries to sell resistance. But each move increases the political pressure around the regime. This is the risk that Tehran created for itself. Rebuilding missiles near Hormuz might have seemed like a show of strength, but it provoked Trump's anger. It put the Revolutionary Guard under greater surveillance and left the Gulf nations on alert against a regime that tries to negotiate with one hand. Still, the Hormuz government, Hormuz. Thank you very much for watching this video until the end. Support our project and contribute financially through the Pix key that appears on your screen. We are an independent channel focused on keeping you informed with the truth. Your contribution helps us keep going.